It's often referred to as the House of 10,000 Ghosts. It has over 160 rooms, 40 bedrooms, and 13 bathrooms, but only one shower. It has stairs that lead to the ceiling and doors that, when stepped through, will drop you a story or more. I'm talking about the Winchester Mystery House, and today I'm going to tell you the story of how it came to be. In order to tell you about the house, I first need to tell you about the mastermind behind it, Sarah Lockwood Winchester. Sarah was born in New Haven, Connecticut in either 1839 or 1840. No birth certificate has been located, and U.S. Census records have conflicting information. What we do know is she was the fifth of 7 children, 6 girls, 1 boy, born to Leonard and Sarah Party. Sarah's father, Leonard, was born in 1807 in Hamden, Connecticut. He came from a long line of woodworkers going back 4 generations and was a wealthy carriage maker. Later, during the Civil War, he made a fortune supplying ambulances to the Union Army. This meant Sarah had a privileged upbringing. She attended the best schools and was taught by private tutors. By the age of 12, Sarah was already fluent in Latin, French, Spanish, and Italian. She was a skilled musician on the piano, organ, and violin. It's no wonder she was dubbed the Belle of New Haven. At 23, she married childhood friend William Winchester, and years later, when Sarah was in her late 20s, the couple would welcome their first and only child on June 15, 1866, a daughter named Annie. What should have been a joyful time for the family was overshadowed by grief. You see, Annie was showing symptoms of digestive problems and was diagnosed with marasmus, a protein disorder that doesn't allow the body to properly digest food. Annie was only 6 weeks old when she passed on July 25, 1866. Loss would be a continual theme for the Winchesters. Sarah's father-in-law, Oliver Winchester, would die of a heart attack in December of 1880. Now, Oliver owned the Winchester Repeating Arms Company, the maker of the gun that won the West. When Oliver died, he left William, his only son, control of the business. But William wouldn't run the company for long. He died just 3 months after taking it over in March of 1881. He was only 43 years old when he passed, but his health had been steadily declining for years due to tuberculosis, a bacterial infection that affects the lungs. It seemed like every winter he would get sick, but he would always make a spring recovery. Unfortunately, this time he wouldn't. At the time of his passing, he and Sarah had been married for 18 years. She loses her only child, and then in a span of 3 months loses her father-in-law and husband. And by all accounts, she was extremely close with her husband's family. She and William lived with William's parents. Oliver even taught her money management skills. As the Winchester Repeating Arms Company became more successful, the family decided to build a new residence large enough to house them all. They hired well-known architect Henry Austin to design their new home, and Sarah played a big role in the design of the house. Because Oliver and William were so busy running the company, Sarah served as the primary contact with the architect. Together, they designed a 20,000 square foot mansion with marble floors, elaborate fireplaces, elegant chandeliers, and floor-to-ceiling windows. It even had a 4-story bell tower. This actually sparked Sarah's interest in design and building. But now Sarah found herself all alone. She wondered if she'd been cursed. When William died, she inherited his personal fortune, as well as ownership of half of the Winchester Repeating Arms Company. It was like her life was a mixture of affluence and affliction with no in-between. It would be hard to tell you the story of the Winchester Mansion without talking about Winchester rifles. They play a big role in how the Winchester Mystery House came to be. You see, Winchester rifles were used a bit during the Civil War, but their popularity would increase after, from everyday civilians. The original Winchester rifle allowed multiple shots to be fired before having to reload, hence the term repeating rifle. It was the first of its kind. They were used so much out west in the new open territories of the United States that the Winchester rifle became known as the gun that won the West. About 720,000 Winchester rifles were manufactured between 1873 and 1923. When I mentioned Sarah inherited her husband's personal fortune, I wasn't joking. She received roughly $20 million. That'd be the equivalent of more than $500 million in 2022, and the Winchester Arms Company left her with a steady stream of income equal to $1,000 a day, $28,000 in 2022. Insane. Grief-stricken and in possession of a massive fortune, she seeks the advice of a medium in Boston. She hoped, perhaps, to get advice from beyond as to how to spend her fortune and what to do with her life. A yacht in Greece. A villa in Tuscany. Instead, she was given a chilling warning. Although we don't know exactly what transpired between Sarah and the medium, it's been said that the medium was able to channel Sarah's late husband, William, who advised Sarah to leave their home in Connecticut and head west to California. She was to use her fortune to build a home for the spirits of those who had fallen victim to Winchester rifles. And she did just that. Sarah took her fortune and went to San Jose, California. In 1884, she purchased the farmhouse that would later transform into the Winchester Mansion. At the time of sale, the house was an 8-bedroom farmhouse with 45 acres that she quickly began making renovations to. The renovations continued until she died in 1922. The house would become her brainchild. It was said that if construction on the house stopped, disaster or death would befall Sarah. It consumed her entire life. She hired carpenters to work around the clock, transforming the farmhouse into a 7-story, 24,000 square foot mansion designed in American Queen Anne Revival architecture. Its purpose? The rooms would shelter good spirits, and the sound of hammers would drive away bad spirits. Was Sarah eccentric, ahead of her time, or heartbroken? All of the above? Due to the lack of a plan and no architecture, the house was constructed in a very disorderly manner. Rooms were added on to exterior walls, resulting in windows overlooking other rooms. Multiple staircases would be added, all with different sized risers, giving each staircase a distorted look. Stranger so was the fact that many of the alterations seemed pointless. Staircases would go up several levels and then abruptly end. Doors and even cupboards would open to solid walls. And hallways would turn a corner only to stop at a dead end. And she had doors of various sizes. It was like a labyrinth. Some of the features she added, however, were innovative for the time. She had her own generator built, which supplied power to the gas lights in the house, and all by the push of a button. At that time, most houses were illuminated by candles or paraffin oil, so this was a big deal. Her home had indoor plumbing, faucets, hot running water, and showers. She had laundry basins with built-in washboards and even garden hoses, which were a brand new invention at the time. Because the home was so large, she had annunciators installed throughout the rooms. It had a master board located in the staff quarters, so when Sarah pressed a button, a card would drop on the board, letting staff know where she was. She also had a system of connecting message tubes. A person on one floor could be heard by someone on another floor by speaking into the tube. She had the home insulated and forced air heating circulated throughout the house. These kinds of features wouldn't be seen on other houses for decades. Sarah insisted the home be built exclusively out of redwood, but because she didn't like the look of the wood, she had it covered with stain and faux grain. When the house was completed, over 20,000 gallons of paint had been used to cover the wood. By the turn of the century, Sarah Winchester had her ghost house. An oddly laid-out mansion with 7 stories, 160 rooms, 47 fireplaces, 10,000 panes of glass, 2 basements, 6 kitchens, and 3 elevators. To put that into perspective, the home has more windows than the Empire State Building. No expense had been spared, and she took advantage of every opportunity to add decorative details. Gold and silver chandeliers hung from the ceilings. She installed hand-inlaid parquet flooring using the finest wood, and had dozens of stained glass windows created by Tiffany & Company. One of the most expensive stained glass windows in the house cost $1,500, a pretty penny back in the 1900s. Sarah chose Lincrusta wallpaper for many of the rooms. It was so expensive it was reserved for the finest buildings, like the Titanic and the White House. She put it everywhere, even on ceilings. In her grand ballroom, she had 2 glass windows with Shakespeare quotes. They're the only ones that have text on them. One says, "Wide unclasp the tables of their thoughts," and the other says, "These same thoughts people this little world." The significance of these quotes remains just one of the many mysteries in the Winchester Mansion. In 2016, psychic Neil Tobin offered his interpretation of them. Viewing the quotes with a spiritual eye, let's go back to the first quote. "Wide unclasped" can be read as a plea to the spirit world to open up communication. The table could literally be referring to a piece of furniture, as oftentimes seances are held around a table. Their thoughts can be read as referring to the thoughts or messages from the spirits. Basically, think of it as saying, as we sit around the seance table, freely and openly communicate messages of the spirits. For the second quote, while never intended by Shakespeare to be read as a continuation of the first quote, Sarah seems to use it that way. These same thoughts could be referring to messages from the spirit world. People could mean those attending the seance. Tobin says, "These same thoughts people this little world," when read in this context, becomes "these aforementioned spirit messages and the physical presences of the spirits who communicate them coexist among us in this world that others mistakenly see as small." He does make an interesting interpretation. What do you think? Sarah had expanded the estate to about 160 acres and made it self-sufficient with its own water supply. The property had a 35-foot water tower with a 10,000-gallon storage tank. Arguably, the pinnacle of the mansion was the 7-story tower that reached 200 feet into the air. Sadly, the tower and upper floors of the mansion wouldn't survive the Great Earthquake of 1906. It's been said she would sleep in a different room every night and use secret passageways to get from room to room in order to confuse any evil spirits. So on the morning of the earthquake, Sarah was sleeping in the Daisy room at the front of the house. The ground begins shaking. The sound of crashing walls and roofs were all that could be heard. The shaking lasts for nearly a minute. The top 3 stories of the house had fallen in, along with a portion of the roof in Sarah's room. It buckled the wall, putting pressure on the door and sealing it closed. It took hours for staff to free her. The experience left Sarah shaken and the front section and upper floors of the home heavily damaged. She even went and lived on her houseboat for some time after the earthquake happened. Ultimately, the top 3 floors of the mansion were removed, leaving the house with 4 stories like we see today. From that point forward, Sarah expands outward. Rumor has it she believed that the spirits were angry with her for spending so much time and money on the front part of the house, leaving Sarah to wall up the front and abandon repair on much of the damage. Throughout the years-long construction of the mansion, Sarah would never confirm that she was building a haunted house. However, stories and rumors circulate throughout San Jose. The contractors who work on the house report Sarah having daily seances with local mediums in an effort to reach good spirits. It's been said much of the design of the home was heavily influenced by these sessions and the messages she received. Every morning, Sarah met with the foreman to discuss building plans, and each night she visited the seance room to speak with the spirits. Let's talk about the infamous seance room. It was quite literally the center of the mansion and the heart of the home. At midnight, Sarah would climb out of her bed and take a winding path through the house, in one door, out another, out onto a balcony, and in through another window. Eventually, she would end up in the spirit room. It has 13 coat hooks on the walls where 13 different colored robes hang. There are 3 doors in the seance room, but get this, the entrance door you come in through has no knob, so you can't get out the same way you came in. Instead, you have to open a secret cupboard door, which puts you into a hallway. On the night she had seances, it was rumored that the bell tower was rung at midnight to summon the spirits and again at 2 a.m. to release them. The seance room isn't the only place that contains elements of the number 13. Sarah insisted that so many things relate back to it. The number 13 pops up everywhere throughout the house. The house has a number of 13 paned windows, 13 paneled ceilings, as well as a 13-step stairway. There's even a sink that arrived with only 12 drain holes. Sarah had 1 more added. Even her will had 13 parts, and she signed it 13 times. On September 5th, 1922, Sarah passed away in her bed, and after 38 years, the hammers stopped. Sarah was 82 years old. Her body was returned to New Haven, Connecticut, where she was buried beside her husband and daughter. Her estate was valued at nearly $3 million in 1922, as filed with the court of the county in Santa Clara. About $44 million in 2022. Sarah left all of her belongings to her niece Marion, who had served as her personal secretary for about 15 years. However, the mansion was never mentioned in her will. Was it because she didn't want anybody to inherit all the spirits that came along with it? Appraisers deemed the house worthless due to its strange design, damage from the earthquake, and long-winded construction. Her niece took everything in it and auctioned it off. Apparently, it took 6 weeks to empty the house of all the furniture. A safe was found in the grand ballroom, and inside that safe was another safe. Interesting. Whatever was in it must have been expensive to go through all that trouble. Is that where Sarah kept her diamonds, fine jewelry, and gold bars? No. All that was inside it were the obituaries for her husband and daughter, along with a lock of her daughter's hair. Was that Sarah's way of telling us that the most valuable things in life aren't things at all? After the house was emptied, a local investor purchased the home for $135,000. And just 5 months after Sarah died, the Winchester Mystery House was open for public tours. Now, many of us have heard about the Winchester Mansion, but what most people don't know about is all the charitable work she's done. And it was that way for a reason. Sarah didn't like to publicize her philanthropy, but she really did a lot. In West Haven, Connecticut, she funded the building and operation of a hospital for patients with TB and had it named in honor of her husband, the William Wirt Winchester Annex for Tuberculosis. Her donations amounted to roughly $33 million in 2022. She single-handedly funded this hospital, and she was especially concerned with helping those in need. She wanted to make sure treatment was available for everyone, and didn't want those sick concerned with how they were going to afford treatment. She routinely sent loads of fruits and nuts from her orchard to orphanages, and when her longtime coachman died, she gave his family money to buy a home. Her attorney and longtime friend Samuel Lieb said Sarah was everything a good woman should be, that she didn't like anyone to notice her good deeds, of which there were many, and that if there was a heaven, she must certainly be in it. Even 100 years after her death, it seemed that Sarah Winchester's house is still holding on to secrets. In 2016, a secret attic was discovered. Inside was a pump organ, a Victorian-era couch, a dress form, a sewing machine, and paintings. Were many of the oddities in the house mistakes that Sarah made because she was an inexperienced architect? Some think so. Still, many believe the house was influenced by the messages she received from her seances. We know she had the money and means to fix any mistakes that were made, and we know that she would routinely make changes. In a letter she wrote to family, it said, "I am constantly having to make an upheaval for some reason. I decided that safety demanded something to be done, so over a year ago, I took out a wall and put in a skylight." And the Winchester Mansion technically wasn't the first house she had ever designed. Remember, she worked alongside the architect to design her father-in-law's home, so chalking it up to inexperience, I'm not entirely sure. After doing the research for this case, I do believe that some of the stairs that go nowhere were probably the result of the 1906 earthquake, but it still doesn't explain secret cupboard doors. It is my hope that you learned something new today. I'm honestly surprised I haven't made a video about the Winchester Mansion earlier, because it's something that's fascinated me since I was a teen. Have you been to the mansion? Like the staircase at Loretto Chapel, I think I need to add this one to my bucket list. If you liked today's video, give it a thumbs up, and hey, while you're at it, consider subscribing to the channel so you don't miss out on the next investigation. And I'm off to book my ticket to the Winchester Mansion.